As a Canadian in Japan and an anarchist, I am fighting every urge and inclination that I have to simply poo-poo all of this and say, who cares? But, having said that, I will offer at least this bit of insight into what is going on for all of you Americans out there. None of this chaos is surprising. The chaos is part of the plan, and we have known this for months at the very least. It has been in black and white and openly reported. People should look into the Transition Integrity Project, which was wargaming out every possible outcome of this selection that is being decided by the voting machines and the vote counters, not the voters. And they wargamed out every possible scenario, including what if Trump doesn't concede and what if we have to kick him out with the military and all of this. It's all been wargamed out.
Thanks for that, James. Thank you so much. I wrote a blog post called "If you're not paying attention to the Transition Integrity Project, then you're not paying attention to USA elections 2020" or something like that. It was a while ago that I wrote it, so I forget the title, but you can see it on the screen here. So thank you for that wonderful introduction, James Corbett. I really appreciate that. So, welcome to Bookmark. This is our special edition, election edition.
Yeah. You know, the circus has come to town. You know, it comes to town every 4 years. So I think, you know, everybody's excited. You know, they actually, the tents are still being taken down. It's taking a while. It's taking longer than usual, apparently. So, you know, the clowns, I guess, are still fighting amongst each other. So they can't get the tents down yet. So the circus is still here, kind of, but not really. I don't know. So yeah, so speaking of Julie's blog post, wanted to promote our blog. We don't talk about that a lot here on Bookmark, but if you go to bookofhours.com or book-of-hours.com/blog, you can see posts and updates that Julie and I write. She tends to write more than I do. I'm writing scripts and writing, you know, other things up.
I work with the scripts too.
Yes, you do. But what I'm saying is you focus a lot on the blogs. That tends to be like your format that you like a lot. So.
Well, what's really interesting about like doing the way that I do the blog is I just usually throw out tiny little morsels of information or thoughts that I have, and you know, I don't pretend to be the news. I don't pretend to be anything. I'm just, you know, putting two and two together, putting the pieces of you know, life in the age of COVID, putting all the pieces together. And a lot of times what happens is these little morsels that I put out on the blog are integrated into the script.
Right.
So it's a, you know, it's a complete system. You know, the blog isn't separate from the script, which is not separate from the, you know, from this commentary. Everything is just kind of, you know, melted together in one presentation that is Book of Hours. Like that's who we are. And
when we do our emails, I tend to borrow things from the different sources that we're doing as well. And so, you know, to use a pejorative, I like to recycle content, but it's, you know, it's useful because, you know, you get your ideas across in the different formats in different ways, and it's also useful in supporting the ideas in those different formats as well.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's the way we process our work and our message. But we're here to talk about the electoral process.
Yeah. So as I said, the you know, the circus has come to town and it's on its way out. But
not soon enough.
But not soon enough, and you know, part of that problem, and I said the clowns are fighting, and that's probably because of the corruption that's taking place.
Oh my God! Yeah, there's so much corruption going on.
And that's you know, that's part of the reason we put that James Corbett thing at the beginning, and it's how we basically feel too. It's you know, the corruption, well, just the general situation along the lines of, you know, electoral politics. The representative democracy, liberal democracy, you know, you're voting for somebody to represent you. Of course there's going to be corruption in that.
we're seeing a lot of correlation with the 2000 election.
Okay.
And you know, I think we're in for a long haul.
Yeah.
I don't think that this is going to be over with by tomorrow, which is basically the end of the week.
There's a lot of pundits that are saying it's probably going to go into December, and I agree with that. I mean, it could even go into January. Going back to the 2000 election, that went well past Thanksgiving, and I remember all the stress and all the hand-wringing that was going on around that. You know, that time it was the... well, there was no sitting president. Clinton was on his way out. He had served his 2 terms, or 2 terms. The George W. Bush group was basically claiming victory over Al Gore, and that was being contested. And it went to the Supreme Court, and it's going to be doing it again. And we're going to talk in a minute about another. Well, actually, no. Let's go back to Julie's blog post about the TIP. Can you
right? So the Transition Integrity Project was a simulated event. So like a game. That's what simulation means. It's a game. So there were a bunch of characters that got together in a room and sat around the table and said, "Let's play a game to see how the November 2020 elections will happen. And if this bad thing happens, then what's going to be the response to that? And if this bad thing happens, then what's going to be the response to that?" So that's what a simulation means. It means it's like a game.
Is that like Dungeons and Dragons for political set?
Yeah, it's everybody plays their part and has their little nameplate, and it tells them who they are.
Cosplay.
So, yeah, exactly. So the simulation event took place in June of 2020, and they conducted this event, and they had all of the appropriate responses to all of the appropriate problems that come with elections. You know, contested elections, and electoral fraud and voter fraud, and people protesting and disrupting. So they had a response to all of these things that tend to come out with elections. Come about from elections. And the report to that response was published in August of 2020. And so right now we're all in a simulation, and we're all playing our parts really well. Well, we're not, because we're not a part of the electoral process
but we're calling the bullshit.
Yeah, and that ironically wasn't a part of the Transition Integrity Project's simulation. Is they didn't have a character to represent people like us that are calling the whole thing bullshit.
I wonder why that is.
I wonder why. Yeah. So that's interesting. I would read the report. Go to my blog post. It's a very short blog post. My whole entire philosophy around USA election 2020, and I think JP agrees with me, is that if you're not looking at the Transition Integrity Project, then you're not really paying attention to election 2020.
Yeah.
So
we have a clip, and I wanted to get into something else in a minute, but I want to play the clip first. And this is Patrick Hennigan from
Henningsen.
And I'm sorry,
Patrick Henningsen.
Okay, I had his name wrong. He's from UK Column and 21st Century Wire, and this is the latest. Well, this is Friday 11/6's edition of UK Column. And let's listen.
So what they're doing in terms of narrative management in the U.S. is the mainstream media, Silicon Valley, are saying that you can't have due process. So normally you make an accusation. This has happened many times before in U.S. history. This is nothing new. You make a challenge to an election result. It goes through due process. You're allowed to make accusations. They haven't obviously had discovery yet and presented all the evidence, but the mainstream media, Twitter, YouTube, are censoring comments by the president, literally censoring. He can't speak to the nation. Imagine that. The president of the United States can't address the nation because they're saying that he's been fact-checked by them and he's been deemed by them to be false, so they've cut him off.
Okay, so that was Patrick, what's his last name?
Henningsen.
Henningsen, okay.
Henningsen.
Okay. He had an interesting thing to say there regarding Silicon Valley's role in how this narrative is being spun out, and we were kind of calling that last week too. I think in last week's
we've been calling out Silicon Valley for years.
Well, yeah, of course, because we come from that region, right?
Yeah,
so
they're
Julie was born in Silicon Valley.
I know. My dad was an engineer. I mean, come on. Basically, Silicon Valley is the reason for all of the problems we're having right now, this very minute. COVID related even.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. But I wanted to get that aside, I wanted to get into also messaging and this whole thing with the election currently. What a lot of people are seeing parallels with. Not only are they seeing parallels with the 2000 election, which was being called out in the TIP report. They were looking at the 2000 election, but another thing that I don't think they used, and a lot of people are correlating with, and Julie and I were talking about this earlier in the week or last week, was the Orange Revolution in Ukraine in 2014, I believe, and it was I think it was 2014. And Julie and I have been talking about how we're in the middle of a color revolution. Many times, and we've been talking about this, but for some reason we were looking up the Orange Revolution.
You're 10 years off, 2004.
2004, okay, 2004, all right.
That's okay.
I knew there was a 4 in there somewhere. Anyway, thank you for looking that up. We were looking at the Wikipedia edition of the of what happened, and even with their editorial bias, I could see a lot of correlation between what's going on now and what happened then. And so these playbooks get reused. And there's a good reason for that. It's easy. And if it works in one place, it's probably going to work somewhere else.
Right.
And so these things get used over and over again.
Right,
and
so if you're not familiar with the 2004 Orange Revolution in the Ukraine, then I would look it up, and you will see a lot of correlations between what we're experiencing now and what they experienced 2004, 16 years ago.
Yeah.
So.
And a lot of we've seen other color revolutions since then. One they attempted in Venezuela. More recently, well, even more recently, something going on, all the uprising and unrest in Hong Kong this last summer, as well, or maybe the summer before.
Also
I don't remember.
in Belarus.
Oh yeah, Belarus, right? Exactly. Some
They
things were going on
that.
there.
Basically, color revolutions are when the leadership is installed democratically by their people, and the United States is like. Hey, do our capitalist, empire bidding, and that leadership goes, yeah, no, I think we're going to stick with our own currency. We're going to stick with the way that, our own socialist, or even communist or capitalist, our version of capitalism or whatever.
In the case of Belarus, I think it was more populist and nationalist for sure.
Right.
Nationalist.
I'm thinking Hong Kong though.
Yeah, Hong Kong,
their own version of the way that they run things in their economy and with their politics and the way they want to do things. We shouldn't be meddling in their elections. We meddle in elections all over the world.
But heaven forbid,
right?
Somebody
and the UK is meddling in our elections right now.
Right now. But we're not going to hear about that because Russia. Yeah. So yeah, it's
it's fuckery.
It's fuckery, right?
It's all fuckery.
So Julie, speaking of fuckery, look at this. So, what the fuck was that?
That's okay. So coming from San Francisco, so in San Francisco, everybody in San Francisco lives in an apartment. It's 95% renters.
Yeah,
nobody can afford to own there.
Right.
So everybody lives in an apartment, and they have 2 closets. They have a closet that is designated for their clothes, and then they have a closet that is designated for their costumes.
Right.
It's all about dressing up and dancing and putting on a costume and acting like
Halloween
a fool.
Halloween is the best, is the favorite, hands down. Now I don't know if they did it this year. They probably didn't.
And they're not going to do Beta Breakers, or it's another reason for people to dress up in costumes in San Francisco, which we talked about in a previous podcast. So when we saw that, my mind immediately went to, so when we saw these mailboxes dancing around and stuff, my mind immediately went to, you know, oh, this must be like a San Francisco thing. Because everybody, basically you've got, you know, an entire city filled with, you know, 30, 40, 50, 60-year-olds that still think that they're 20. Everyone has a Peter Pan complex. Nobody is really like taking responsibility for anything and acting like an adult anywhere. And everyone plays the blame game on, you know, everybody else. So instead of, you know, looking at the kind of policies that are driving, the kind of Silicon Valley policies that are driving national legislation in the national economy, and those policies international, and those policies are driving people into deep poverty and misery. And that's coming right out of San Francisco, you know, the city that wears costumes, you know, and says, hey, look, we're just trying to make the world a better place.
Right. So, you know, we know that the reason for the mailboxes is because, especially in Pennsylvania, there's been a big push for the mail-in ballot. And the reason that a lot of these states are holding up the counting is because they're saying, well, you know, the mail-in ballots haven't come in, and you know, and there was a big push on the side of the Democrat Party to, you know, to extend the voter laws, the election laws, to include this thing that they wanted in the first place. So they're like, you know, trying to manipulate both the election laws as well as just everything.
Manipulate election laws?
Yeah, what? And manipulating the vote, you know. So then there's this mailbox dance that's going on, you know, that supports the whole idea of mail-in ballots. Hey,
let's fuck over the country. Let's fuck over the voters.
Let's, you know, and so taking a fraudulent activity like the presidential elections and making it even more fraudulent by doing the mail-in vote, and then let's dance about it. Well, it's like there's an old adage in advertising, Julie, if you have nothing else to say, sing about it. But in this case, dance about it, because we've been seeing a lot of
dancing
that
is
all
everywhere
year
in this color revolution.
Yeah.
In this regime change operation where you will be introduced into the misery industrial complex.
So 2020 has been all been all about, yeah, exactly. 2020 has all been all about dancing,
misery,
and
dancing.
We have no idea where this video came from. We have no context.
There's no context to it. It was found on Twitter, and I was like trying to read through the Twitter. The Twitter feeds to maybe give it some context, like, okay, why is it here? Like, what's the point? Yeah. And of course, because we are in the middle of all of this fuckery that is the election crisis, you know how you have like disasters, like you've got tsunamis and you've got earthquakes and you've got fires. Well, I equate elections with like a crisis, like it's another disaster. So
especially the last maybe 20-40 years, I don't know.
Right? So I equate that, so that's why I call it the election crisis,
right?
The same way I would call, like, you know, an earthquake a crisis. But so what you often get with an election crisis, and you're trying to figure out what people are saying, is just gibberish. Like, it's just nonsensical gibberishy language. And that's what we're getting all across the board on every social media feed, all over Facebook, is just gibberish that does not have any basis in what's really happening, which is that you're being regime changed for corporate capture.
Well, I think a lot of it,
human capital markets.
Yeah, exactly. And I think a lot of it, you know, most of it is coming from the Democratic side.
Yeah, it is.
And the Dems,
of course.
And it's all about, you know, diversion and
Orange Man bad.
Orange Man bad, and like basically, you know, ending the conversation there.
Orange Man bad.
You know,
you're blocked.
You're blocked. Exactly. But also,
that's what it's come down to.
It reminds me of the bit on The Simpsons where, you know, a person will say, "Oh, look over there," and then you see the character like looking away, and then you hear like footsteps like running away. You know, it's sort of like that kind of thing where it's like
the old gag.
It's a gag. Yeah, that's basically it.
The oldest trick in the book.
And it's like, oh, hey, look, Haley's Comet. You know, it's like, oh, take your lunch.
Yeah, so it's really gibberishy language. It means absolutely nothing, and it's really infantile.
It is, and it's meant to like distract you from what's actually taking place, and demanding there be you know, this and demanding that, and it's like, but that's not what we're trying to do here. So, but speaking of that, we have a video about counting.
Count the vote.
Your vote matters. Every vote matters.
And every vote deserves to be counted.
It takes time to get it right, and it's okay if it takes time.
Because we are the people, and the will of the people will determine the outcome of the election.
Democracy is worth the wait. Whether you cheered before or this is your first time, you can cheer for democracy.
Okay, so that's somebody we used to know in another life, she's awfully perky in this video.
In real life,
in
too.
real life too.
In
that's
real
true.
life. In
Yeah.
fact, every time we would come across her at by coalition events or any kind of event or shows,
Just
or
cycling around the city.
just cycling around the city, we would always walk away from our conversations with her like, is she like on something? Is this for real? Because she's also an actress.
Yeah.
She's part of the Neo-Futurists, which, if you're familiar with theater in New York or Chicago, they put on a production called Too Much Light Makes the Baby Go Blind. And I have one experience with them back in the early 90s when I spent about 5 minutes in Chicago, and that was like 1.5 million years ago, and I made the mistake of telling her that. But the point is that she's like this super bubbly, perky person. Like, somebody recently said that Whitney Webb was perky. Whitney Webb is not perky, not compared to this person who created this video. Whitney Webb is not perky at all compared to this person. If you met this person who created this video, you would be like, this person isn't even real. This person cannot possibly be real.
Well, okay, so
It's just like...
the thing that we noticed about this
there's
video
some similarities.
is there's some similarities to some other propaganda that was released about 4 years ago. Let's watch.
Cowardice. Are you serious? Apologies for freedom. I can't handle this. When freedom brings, answer the call. On your feet, stand up tall. Freedom's on our shoulders. USA. Enemies of freedom. Face the music. Come on, boys, take them down. President Donald Trump knows how to make America great. Deal from strength or get crushed every time. Over here, USA. Over there, USA. Freedom and liberty everywhere. Oh, say can you see it's not so easy, but we have to stand up tall and answer freedom's call.
Oh God, please help me. Julie and I, when we saw that last 4 years ago when it was released, we were just like, oh my God. That was so
like,
bad.
This is what it's come down to.
It's almost as bad as, well, it's worse actually than that whole Up With People from the 80s. That was, yeah.
Okay, so that is the fuckery.
Yeah.
In a nutshell.
And it comes from both sides, you know?
In a nutshell. And I think there's also a very serious aspect to the fuckery, which I really wanted to drive home. There's a wonderful woman who is a poll worker Connie Johnson, and I've been following her.
She's in Detroit, Michigan.
Right.
Yeah.
I've been following her a few Facebook Live feeds that she's done since November 3rd. And here's the deal. JP and I do not engage in the electoral process, which means that we don't vote, which means that we don't put our energy and our time and our love and our blood, sweat, and tears into the voting process. Instead, we put it back into ourselves, and we put it back into the people in our community.
Well, we put it into the work that we produce for you.
Right. So we believe in sovereignty and self-driven democracy, which is a direct form of democracy. We feel that that's the purest form of democracy.
Direct democracy.
Direct democracy is a purest form of democracy. That being said, people who do vote and are legitimately trying to push forward democracy that helps everybody, or legislation that could hopefully be passed that would help everybody, we certainly are supportive of those people who do that. This woman, I just want to put that out there. We read the room. We know that we're living in the United States of America, which is, been led to believe that representative democracy is the only way that you can impact progress or success or whatever in the body politic, right?
Yeah.
We've been led to believe that. Personally, our personal opinion is that that's a false narrative.
It's a load of dingo's kidneys.
It's a load of bullshit. That's what we believe. Now, you can choose to believe something different. We're not going to, we're not going to sling mud at you for voting the way that you often sling mud at us for not voting.
Julie,
we don't do that.
You can't complain if you don't vote.
Right, so stupid. That's like really dumb.
Yeah.
That's like saying, oh, she wore a short skirt, therefore she deserves to be raped.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the same kind of logic.
It is.
So this woman is clearly like she's very dedicated to the concept of representative democracy. She believes in it. She's clearly been a poll worker for a long time. And what people don't understand is that being a poll worker requires a knowledge of federal law. It requires a knowledge of local law. There are certain processes that are put in place that absolutely must be followed. And all of this, in this particular election theater and election crisis, federal law has been violated, local law has been violated, the electoral fraud is rampant.
Well, we have an example of that, and it's not the woman you're talking about, but it's here in our state of Pennsylvania. Let's watch that clip right now.
This lady is marking the ballots. I filmed her a half hour ago doing 6, and she's still working at it. Let's stamp it, received, and let's fill in our 6 blanks. All at the top of the tickets on each one. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And there's a security guard right there who's watching her. The cops are in on it. Disgusting.
Okay, so so going back to what I was saying, now that you've seen that clip, what we're trying to say is that, we support, sort of fundamentally, like we respect people for being engaged in that process. Now, the clip of the woman you just saw who's like filling out the little circles, so that's a poll worker. And a poll worker, so I was a poll worker once for about 45 minutes years and years ago. And when they told me, you have to understand, there's all these laws that are in place and you have to do everything correctly. And I had somebody standing over my shoulder looking down at me to make sure that I wasn't tampering with the ballots. What they said to do was to take the ballot And if anybody hadn't filled in the circle enough to just complete the circle that's filled in so that the machine or the scanner could read it. Now this was years and years and years ago. And I was there for, I guess, about an hour. And I did like 1, maybe 2. But all the ones that I looked at were fine. And I just, you know, I just went like this. I just turned the page over. You know, I didn't care who they were voting for. My job...
You could even see, really, because it was based on, like, these dots didn't correlate with any names.
Right.
Yeah.
So, whatever.
Yeah.
My job was to make sure that the little circles were filled in. So, maybe the video that you just saw, maybe that was that woman's job. But the fact that she was doing it consistently, the fact that she was filling in the circles on every ballot, was weird. You don't, when you're filling in circles that are already filled in by someone who's already voted. I can't believe I'm even talking about this because I don't even engage or believe in the electoral process. I think the entire thing is fraudulent from the ground up.
That's why we're bringing this up, because we're actually giving you an example of the fraud that's taking place.
Now this is electoral fraud, not voter fraud. That's something different. So this woman is filling in the circles, and I had, you know, somebody locally jump onto the, when we showed this video on our social media feed, somebody local jumped on and said, well, she's just filling in the circles that are already filled in, and she's just, you know, making sure that it's readable by the scanner. And we're like, okay, yeah, that is the point, but statistically speaking, you don't do it for every single one. And I'm looking closely at this video, and feel free to look yourself because we just played it. I felt like those ballots were blank. They seemed blank.
Did the voiceover, because we just took a clip of this, did the voiceover at some point say that they were blank?
They said that it was a poll worker filling in circles, filling in ballots. They didn't specify whether they were blank ballots or what. So I realized that that poll worker is there to fill in the circles that are already sort of halfway filled in so that the scanner can pick them up. And that's fine, but not for every single one. It's not a statistic reality to fill in every single one.
For the need to do that.
And she was just doing it consistently, like every single one. She's just filling in every single one. And I just felt that that was overdoing it. Like I was like, it just gave me pause for thought. So there's a lot of things that are bubbling up, you know, like security guards that aren't letting poll workers and observers go into these polling stations, which, you know, there's federal laws you have to follow regarding the whole election ballot thing, okay? Look, I don't know too much about it. This isn't really our cup of tea, but it's like, there's a lot of shenanigans happening
all over the country.
And just because we don't engage in the process doesn't mean that we're going to ignore those shenanigans. And not only is the woman that I was originally talking about, Connie Johnson, not only is she engaged in the process, which we are not, and not only is she a poll worker to observe to make sure that there's no fraudulent activity that goes on, and we're not, like, we're just not engaged at all. But she's also like a Christian, and she's also like a Republican. She's all the things that we are not. She is fundamentally, you know, way outside of our comfort zone. way outside of our comfort zone. But that does not mean that based on her understanding of federal law, how elections are supposed to work, how ballot counting procedures are supposed to work, how the observers are supposed to legally be allowed in. Based on all of this information, I feel sympathy towards her. I'm allowed to make the choice and say, based on her understanding of the way the things work, I'm going to support this woman. You know, even though everything else about her is completely outside of my
where we
belief
stand.
system.
Right, exactly. Well, let's give a clip of that, because I feel like, you know, we were talking about her. We should at least yeah. So let's give a clip of that, and we'll play that right now.
It is just really unbelievable that in this day and age that you have people that are cheering when GOP is getting removed from the room because the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services came in and said, oh, the room's over capacity by 60 people. So what did they do? Did they poll? Did they find out who was from what party? No. They went in to the GOP people and said, we need 60 of your people to leave the room right now. Oh. So we're cheering. Stop the vote. Not cheering, but chanting. So these are all people that have been, are registered to be poll watchers and poll challengers. So there's two different jobs here. The poll challengers aren't being allowed in the room because the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services says that it's over capacity. Yet, they are not pulling Democrats out of the room, only Republicans. Republicans and nonpartisan.
Okay, so that was Connie Johnson in Detroit, and what the reason I wanted to play that is because Julie showed it to me, and she looks very calm. She isn't like, oh my god, oh my god, oh my god, and she isn't crying.
Right.
She isn't like she's upset, but she's not crying. She's not going, this is wrong, this is wrong. You know, she's very matter of fact about the whole thing.
Right.
And all her videos are like that. And she apparently is a very respected poll worker and has been doing this for years and understands the process.
I believe so. Yeah. She understands the process. The other thing about her, too, that you have to also take into consideration is, I feel like when she was recording these videos, I feel like she had been there for like all night.
She had been.
Like she'd already been there all night, so she was tired,
right,
and beaten down and pushed out of the place that she was supposed to be,
right,
that she was called in to do a specific job, which was to observe.
And volunteer her time at that.
I know. So just because we are not engaged in the political process doesn't mean that we're going to disrespect people who are.
So on the other hand, okay, so when we make our analysis out there, it's like we're like, oh, how dare you say that? Like somebody on Facebook recently, somebody that we know, asked what everyone thought about the Trump speech or
the Trump speech.
This Trump speech.
Like, what was your opinion of it?
Yeah, what was your opinion of it? So we gave that.
And we know this person like in person. Like this is a real life person we know
in real life,
not just a Facebook
person.
Friend or
but this
whatever.
was on Facebook, and so I said something like, well, I feel that he looked presidential, and yet it looked to me like he was conceding.
Like it was a bit of a concession speech.
Yeah. And now I don't know if he is or not, but that was my impression.
That was
based
our
on his demeanor and his body language and the sound of his voice and the things he talked about. And we got nothing but shit for that coming back at us, or me, and basically. It's coming back to what we were talking about before with the gibberishy language and so if you do not repeat back the language or the words or the ideas that people want to hear, you get this sort of psychopathic narcissistic thing coming back at you, like that basically takes away the focus of the conversation.
It really is like,
and we get we get frustrated with that because we take the time to analyze, do our research, analyze, and make our videos, and in a lot of cases what will happen is that these opinions will come back at us saying, that's just an opinion piece, and but they don't bother to look at the video, or
I'm
they don't
so sorry that I have a brain and I'm utilizing
I'm sorry that we did the research
for free speech.
and went to the trouble of putting together a video that explains something very simply to you, and that you don't seem to want to look at it, and yet you're going to tell me that I am creating propaganda, but I'm actually creating informative propaganda.
Right.
So
Well, it's really just, I think it's just collapsed and devolved into Romper Room.
Yeah.
I mean, that's literally what we're living in right now.
Yeah.
And I think social media, you know, except for the choice few, I think social media is just a playground for children to, you know, throw fits and look for echo chambers. And unlike most people in our group who support our work, you know, our patrons who have gone on to do really excellent work themselves and have been interviewed and are very lifted up in their community for their opinions. You know, so our patrons are not just, you know, our patrons actually have been interviewed and have, you know, and they're actually,
they do their own research,
they're conducting movements and they're doing some pretty intense things. I'm like, wow, you know, I really am honored to be connected with these people. So not only do we have our little, you know, like echo chamber, but I personally, not so much JP, but I personally go outside of my comfort zone. I hang out on, you know, maybe a Facebook post of somebody that I don't have any agreement with on anything, because I want to hear what they're saying. I want to try to get into their minds and understand where they're coming from. I don't want to just live in my echo chamber. And so we made this, you know, this comment to our friend, and we were like, well, we felt that you asked, what did you think of the speech? And so we responded, well, we felt that the speech was, you know, presidential, but it also felt like a bit of a concession speech. It was really strange. And we didn't watch it on mainstream media. We watched it on C-SPAN. C-SPAN actually showed the whole speech. Mainstream media, all the mainstream state-backed networks like ABC, NBC, CNN, MSNBC, whatever, they all cut it off and added this little thing where this like reporter said something like something inflammatory, and it made Trump, and when Trump was walking away, it made Trump look like he was running away from the question.
Right, the CNN,
I don't know.
CNN reporter was yelling at him, are you conceding? Are you feel bad that you're not stepping down, or something ridiculous?
And that's not what we saw.
Yeah.
And so I think what's happening is there's a lot of editing and a lot of reframing. You know, people, because we're two people who actually do videos, and so we edit and reframe what we want to say, what points we really want to get across to you in our video essays. So we recognize when it's being done to us, and I think a lot of those mainstream clips that you see of Trump speaking and things like that are reframed and repositioned in ways to really really infuriate you. And when you're infuriated, you don't think.
Right.
Because you're too busy being mad. Because it's all about an emotional reaction.
Right.
So again, we're coming back to Romper Room, where it's all about, I want my cookies and popsicles, and I want to just, you know, have this emotional outburst, as opposed to actually engaging any kind of intellect. And we're talking like 40, 50, 60-year-olds, and it's kind of embarrassing.
Well,
I mean, and that's how the rest of the world looks at us.
No.
The rest of the world is looking at us like we're this big, giant playpen.
Well, and then also,
you know, and there's just a few of us that are acting like adults in the room.
Well, going back to the whole idea that, you know, Silicon Valley is leading the narrative.
Well, there you go.
That's what I'm saying. I mean, I think that Silicon Valley is responsible for the behavior that's going on because of the way that social media has been developed and the way that it's organized, and you know, with the dopamine hits from, you know, putting stuff out there and getting stuff back, you know, getting likes and getting things, and it reduces everybody down to this sort of very childish way of interacting.
Yeah, everything's reductive thinking now.
Yeah,
it really is.
And so, you know, but that goes also along the lines of, like, we were talking about, you know, a collapsed society and how, you know, the behavior that goes along with a collapsed society, and that we're in the middle of that right now. And you know, Chris Hedges has been talking about this for the last 2 years or more, last 3 years.
I mean,
in his book, the what is it called, the Farewell Tour.
Yeah.
You know, and he was talking about these different aspects of it, and you know, you know, whatever about Chris Hedges. I'm not a big fan of him, and he, you know, really, but he really, I think he nailed it with that book.
Yeah.
In like diagnosing what's going on in our society right now.
With anomie, and which is a term you should look up. So we're living in this kind of like, you know, reductive thinking, depraved society, you know. Now, we realize that this video is supposed to be an analysis of the election, but you can't analyze this crisis, which is the 2020 U.S. election, without analyzing and sort of armchair diagnosing the psychological aspects of this and the depravity that's swept across our nation as a result of, you know, Silicon Valley influence, as a result of, you know, the capture of our economy, and now the capture of our human rights, which is where we are right now. We are literally existing in a prison, you know, and you can't just diagnose the election crisis that we're undergoing right now without looking at, you know, this bigger aspect to it. And the Farewell Tour, America the Farewell Tour, the Chris Hedges book, for all of his issues that we have with him, that book really does display it very clearly what's wrong with America right now.
Well, and you know, so we talk about Silicon Valley, but we also talk about you know, the corporate takeover of our government. We talk about this in and the global governance you know, trend and move to go to a global governance. In our latest, well, not our latest is coming out soon, but our latest movie or video before that, Deconstruction, we talk about you know, the interstate compacts and this corporate takeover of democracy. And we've diagnosed this, you know, Julie and I have been talking between each other about this for a couple of years now, how I feel like there's this big faction, or I mean this big thing, like sort of like the United States or the government is a big corporation, and two factions are fighting for power within it. And basically we do have like more or less one party. It's just that, you know, there's two factions within that. So somebody we were listening to the other day basically reiterated to us what we've been talking about, how, you know, there's corporatists and globalists, for lack of a better word, and the nationalists. And I want to play a little bit of that, okay? All right.
Well, this is insanity that is related to two main entities within the U.S. system that are really fighting it out. They're at each other's throats. This is not controlled opposition. This is a real fight between the people who represent globalism and you know, the elite who are more connected with the financiers and who draw their advantage from finance and the way that they manipulate things that way, on the one hand, and on the other hand you have the more national-based industry, the military, the people who are used to running an empire from a military perspective, and who and the two sides are just going crazy at each other like never before.
Okay, well that was Denny Rencourt. Okay.
Rencourt, yeah.
And he, I follow him on Facebook, and this was from one of his YouTube videos. He was being interviewed by somebody, Dan Dix,
Canada. Yeah.
You know, yeah.
But we don't follow.
Yeah.
We're not.
Whatever. Well, but this was his side. He recorded it from his side. And put it on his YouTube channel as well.
It was nice.
And so it's a nice. I like him a lot. He's very calm and very measured.
He's really like rational.
Rational. That's a good word.
Which you don't get a lot of on YouTube.
No, and so I liked what he had to say there, and it kind of reiterated back to us what we've been thinking as well.
Right.
And so we're seeing this, and we talk about this in Deconstruction as well.
Right.
You know, and so if you haven't seen that, go back and look at that. That's our most recent video that we've released of our essay series.
Right. So please, look at Deconstruction. So the idea that, you know, one thing I want to really drive home is that, you know, the 2016 election, in my opinion, was how do I put this? Okay, so everybody wanted to vote for Bernie, so he basically won the primary, right? He became the Democrats Party's candidate, and it would have been Trump versus Bernie. And he was legitimately voted into that. So then when it came time to vote for the president, you would have voted for either Bernie or Trump. And the fact that you didn't have this legitimately elected option is where a coup took place. You had an illegitimate option, which was Hillary Clinton. She didn't win any votes. She didn't win the vote in the primaries.
The manipulation that you're seeing now in this national election from the Democratic Party is what took place. It was sort of a dry run for them last election, in the 2016 election. You know what they did in the primaries.
Right.
You know?
So what I'm trying to say is that it's kind of like the way I look at the military. Don't hate the players who are poor and need to maybe enlist in the military so that they can earn an income and feed their family. Don't hate the players, hate the game. The game is what's causing instability throughout the globe. Okay, the game is, those people that are at the top, that are running the military industrial complex and all of the the mercenary agents and companies that are propelling it forward.
Yeah.
But don't hate the guy down the street
because he signed up for the Marines.
Because he signed up for the Marines because he's trying to feed his family. Okay, so it's the same thing. Don't hate the voters for voting for Donald Trump. That was their only option. Had they been able to vote for Bernie Sanders, they would have voted for Bernie Sanders. But that option was taken away from them unlawfully, fraudulently, illegally. So what was put in was the only option they had.
Right. So they had a choice between Clinton and Trump, and most, like all those Bernie supporters that either bowed out. Some of them went to the side of Clinton, but what Julie said is they went to the Trump side.
They went.
And they just
a swore they went to Trump because that's the only option you gave them.
And so that's what we've been, I guess
except
that's
for Jill Stein.
But she wasn't even. I don't think she was on the ballot in some states.
She wasn't on the ballot in Pennsylvania.
Yeah,
when we said we voted for Jill Stein, people were like, "Who's that?"
Who's right.
That?
So and then they squelched her election.
Totally.
They said that she had a million votes basically, and she had
and then after the election, she became compromised.
Yeah.
And we were like, okay, we're done.
We're done.
Like, we're really done. We're going to go back to our original thought on this whole thing, which is that it's completely fraudulent.
Yeah.
And who knows when it's not been fraudulent.
And so what we're trying to say is that this whole thing, this whole game, this whole circus has been basically you get one clown or you get the other.
Right.
And this is the way it's been for a very long time.
I think what I'm trying to also say is that the voters legitimately voted in Donald Trump because that was their legitimate vote. Donald Trump is a figurehead that is going to pass the policy that represents Silicon Valley, big pharma, big military, Wall Street, the privatization of your lives. So, but because people really do believe in the electoral process and they think that by voting the person that they want, it's going to drive human rights to progress, it's going to drive like a better outcome for your life.
Right.
You can't blame them for engaging in this really false process, because they think that they're investing in something that's going to do something better for them.
And on the other hand, it's like, after a while,
I guess,
you kind of have to, everybody loves to sing that, everybody in a certain age group loves to sing that song, Won't Get Fooled Again by The Who, and yet they keep going back.
Oh, I know. It's the definition of insanity, basically.
To counter your thing,
Yes,
your
please,
point there,
Yeah.
election cycles does it take for you to understand that the presidential elections don't matter? What really matters, if you're going to follow,
this idea
of representative democracy and liberal democracy, what really matters is the more local elections. We'll get into that in a minute, but this whole game, the presidential election has become more and more and more and more. As in my lifetime, I've seen it go from a TV show to like this fantastic traveling show, all-consuming thing that's just
it happens every 4 years, and yet it never.
Insane.
It happens every 4 years, but check this out. We've been hearing about 2020 since 2016, haven't we? So it's become this all-consuming thing. It's like, can you imagine if your entire 12 months of your life and all the 365 days of the year was consumed with Christmas?
Yeah, I was going to go there too.
Yeah. So we're on the same page. We get it. So this is what the last 4 years has been. It's been a 4-year election.
It has.
Elections are supposed to come around every 4 years, and you think about it in maybe September, and then you vote in November, and then you move on, and you don't think about it for another 4 years.
And yet, it makes you wonder, well, why is it that we need to get this thrown in our faces for at least 2 years prior to the election?
At least.
In past cycles, and now we're getting it, this past one was like the whole 4 years. So why is it that we're being manipulated so much? Why is it we're being propagandized so much? Why is the messaging so intense? What are they hiding?
Yeah.
What is going on? Why are we being distracted with all this bullshit?
Oh, we know what they're hiding.
Well, there's a lot that's going on in the background.
I mean, all of our videos say what they're hiding.
Yeah, exactly. So,
that's why we exist. That's why our platform exists, to tell you what's really going on.
So there's a lot of we feel that the presidential election, the United States presidential election, and I'm sure it's the case for a lot of other countries too, Canada, UK, France, all these countries, Australia. The elections are there to keep you distracted from what's going on behind the scenes. It's like the Wizard of Oz. Don't pay attention to the man behind the curtain. That's basically what's going on. And it's not Putin. Putin is not, and we got into an argument with somebody about that too.
Liberals.
So so we feel that maybe that Trump actually was probably the last legitimately elected
That's what I'm trying to say.
president.
Is that I truly feel that Trump was legitimately.
So despite what we say about
the
fraud and the bullshit that goes on, there actually probably was a real true. Democratically elected president this last time around. Whether you like him or not, you cannot ignore the fact that people voted for him.
People voted for him because, the majority of the people don't have millions of dollars, unlike people we know in San Francisco that are set for life. Yeah. The majority of people don't have a couple of homes. Believe it or not, the majority of people in the United States were really hurt by Obama's policies, financially hurt, and hurt in all sorts of ways by his policies.
Well, and by W's ahead of him. He set up the pins
before him.
Right. Well,
Oh my goodness.
So they all build on each other.
Yeah.
And we featured those three presidents
in
Clinton,
deconstruction.
Yeah, for a reason, and in deconstruction. Well, no, in lifelong learning.
Oh, also in lifelong learning too.
For a reason, because those three presidents set up the situation that led us to where we are now.
Yeah.
And it's important to remember that those three presidents, they're still alive, and they set up the situation that we're living in today. Now, you can go back further if you want to, but I think those three are the most important figures to look at for the fuckery that we're dealing with right now. Everything from COVID to the way the elections are run to the global agendas that are taking place to just about everything that's going on that's negative in our world right now. You can look to those three men as being responsible, or at least being the figureheads for what's going on right now.
Right. So, did you want to talk about that?
Well,
we already did.
We kind of did. So we talked about fraud and I think what we'd like. Oh, I missed. Oh yeah. So I guess we like to come back to language a lot. So I'll just mention this real quick and we'll move on. Yeah. A lot of people are saying, "Oh, it's voter fraud," and it's like, well, there is some voter fraud going on, but there's a lot more electoral fraud going on, and there's a difference between the two. And you want to talk about that real quick?
Sure. So voter fraud is when an individual, so I'm not registered to vote, okay? I'm not registered to vote. If I took my little ballot and walked to my polling place and voted and put my ballot in with my name on it when I'm not registered to vote, that's voter fraud. Or
dead people voting.
Or if I walk to the polling place and I put my dead grandmother's name on the ballot, that's voter fraud. Now, voter fraud has taken place about 2 times in the last 150 years. Okay? It doesn't exist, in other words. Electoral fraud, on the other hand, is a whole different kind of fraud when it comes to the ballot. It's when you've got, say, Bill Clinton shaking people's hands when they're in line to vote. That's electoral fraud. Candidates or former presidents are not allowed to influence voters.
Let's talk about something more recent. And that's
something more recent.
So this Connie Johnson was talking about how a van pulled up in front of the
3 vehicles pulled up.
Yeah, one was a Ferrari,
a Chrysler, and a Ferrari.
Well, it was a Chrysler van.
Oh, a Chrysler van.
Yeah, so it was a van, and like a bag or a box of
130,000
ballots. And something that was statistically impossible.
Right.
They all voted for Joe Biden.
Right. So that's statistically impossible, especially since she went on to explain that Wayne County, Michigan, which is where
these ballots apparently came from, is
mostly like libertarian and green parties. So 130,000.
Yeah, a lot of.
So what you have is a combination of, you have like junk ballots, okay, with junk names. So that is actually voter fraud, but you also have this idea that they're suddenly being dumped onto the polling place that
from
the
where?
observers and the polling agents have to count, and they're like, well, we need to verify these. We can't just accept them at face value. We need to verify that they're legitimate ballots. Were they copied? Like, where did they come from? What are they? They need to verify the legitimacy of those ballots. The electoral fraud took place when the security people said, oh, no. Because COVID, you're not allowed to be in the room. You can't verify them.
Yeah, you can't have this many people in here.
Shuffled them away.
Right.
So they could never verify these sudden drop of 130 ballots at 4 in the morning. 130,000 ballots that all voted for Joe Biden at 4 in the morning. They couldn't verify them. That's electoral fraud.
And something else that's taking place is, these kind of drops, or these kind of like sudden like bulk, deliveries of ballots that will have Joe Biden on them, and they will only have Joe Biden on them. So they won't have any other of the down ticket.
I know, right?
The down ticket votes on there. So they didn't.
None of the other down.
Yeah, I don't want to take the time to vote for these other people, and it's like, wow, that's really consistent that so many
hundreds
people
of thousands
didn't want
to
vote for their Democratic down ticket people, and so
that's not the way.
People are lazy, but people are not that lazy.
I don't know. People are pretty lazy.
But it's statistically impossible for that amount of people,
right,
to have that kind of consistency in a batch of ballots. It's not.
So I hope everybody
understands. Unless it's cheating, which is electoral fraud.
Right. I hope everybody understands the difference between voter fraud and electoral fraud. Voter fraud basically doesn't happen. The Republican side of the one-party system always uses the term voter fraud to create a kerfuffle, but it doesn't really truly exist. this idea that these ballots were dropped off at, you know, under the cover of darkness at like 3, 4 in the morning at these polling places, and all hundreds of thousands of these ballots were Joe Biden, should give people pause for thought. That seems like electoral fraud.
And it's
to me.
almost, and it's
and the fact that they were not allowed to verify them,
right.
That's what's key.
Well, I think what else was going on is that I think the Democratic Party, who's responsible for a lot of this fraud.
You think?
Okay. is also using sort of like a baiting tactic where it looks like voter fraud.
It's a baiting tactic,
right? So that the Republicans then react, which is what they do really well.
I know, right? That's all they do.
Reactionary.
React.
They react with, "This is voter fraud," and it's like, oh. You keep bringing that up.
Keep saying that when we know for sure that voter fraud doesn't even exist.
Yeah, so
no, and it legitimately doesn't exist. Right. That's the whole thing. Yeah. You know, so that's why we don't play this game.
So that's what's going on with that, right, and so we feel like you know all this lying and all this corruption and all this bullshit when the circus comes to town is a real waste of time, and you really need to pay attention to what's really important if you're going to participate in liberal democracy, in representative democracy. You need to pay attention to what's really, really important. And it's not the presidential election.
No, it's not.
It's something more local.
It's very localized. Would you like me to field this?
Yeah, and I think it goes along with what we were talking about with the blue wave that's going on.
Okay, so let's qualify or, quantify or define blue wave, red wave. So usually when you hear someone talk about a blue wave or a red wave, like in mainstream press, what they're talking about is a wave of voters that voted blue or a wave of voters that voted red, okay? When I talk about the blue wave that occupied your local seats in your local municipalities, so when I say blue wave, that's what I mean by blue wave. So what has happened is a few years ago, and I mentioned this on an audio podcast, which one of our patrons has shared around, and so thank you for that. But now that I'm on this format, I'll repeat what I said in the audio. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez sprung up out of nowhere. All of a sudden, her posters were all over the district that she was running in New York City. Joe Crowley was
he was the
district rep
right.
for this particular district in New York City. He was already there. He is an old school Democrat. He's for the working class, and he wanted a good income for the working class. He wanted something akin to universal health care or Medicare for all,
for his district.
For his district, he was progressive, the real progressive, like a real
old school progressive,
old school Democrat. Working class all the way. He really appealed to the middle, lower classes. His district voted for him. They wanted him in. Everything was good. All of a sudden, out of nowhere, he had this opponent who came out of nowhere. This, cute Puerto Rican girl. Is it Puerto Rican or I forget?
She's Puerto Rican.
Puerto Rican young woman came out of nowhere. She was in this dance video, and she had a really slick marketing campaign, and that was really emotional.
And there was like a film that was made, like a documentary film.
Netflix did a film about her.
Well, no. Before that, during the election, this couple in Detroit who
that's what I'm talking about.
These propagandists who did
propaganda film.
Yeah.
Well, it was only like 2 minutes,
right?
But it was a campaign film.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
it was a film to promote her campaign.
Right.
And it was pure propaganda, totally emotionally manipulative, saccharine sweet bullshit. All right, so everybody in that district was like, who is this person that's, her posters winding up in coffee shops, and who the heck is she? Nobody wanted her, nobody liked her. Then, she and Nancy Pelosi got into a fake fight. She's like, I'm progressive. And Nancy Pelosi is like, you need to sit down and stop being progressive. And she's like, but I'm progressive. And then a couple months later, they were like hugging.
Right. Yeah.
So clearly they're on the same side, right? So she ends up winning her district, and poor Joe Crowley is pushed out, even though everyone voted for him, everyone wanted him. He was also in that wonderful strategic position where he was going to take Nancy Pelosi's place.
Yeah.
He had,
as the House leader,
choreographed
Speaker
a career. He had choreographed a career in politics, which is the old school way of doing politics, where you choreograph and move yourself like in a chess game. You move yourself to that position where you can eventually ouster somebody like Nancy Pelosi and have an opportunity to replace her.
Right.
But that's like an old way of doing politics. Now it's all about, you know, posters and videos and, you know,
well, I mean, it's always been about image, but this is image. This is on steroids. This is
right,
the old way of doing things. But yeah, completely different way of doing things.
There is no actual vote that took place for Ocasio-Cortez or AOC. She didn't really win her seat, but she was installed in her seat anyway, and everybody was like, what the hell is this? Now, I'm in San Francisco when this happens, and my first reaction is, well, come on, maybe New Yorkers will start showing their teeth and get that bitch out of there and get Crowley back in, and they'll fight it, and they'll contest it, and they'll take it to court, and they'll become the New Yorkers that they always claim that they are.
I know, right?
But they never did. They were just like, okay. You know, and they let her take over. That was the test balloon for what we're experiencing right now. What we are experiencing right now is an army of AOCs that have taken over local municipalities in their seats. So we're talking is people who are on the school board.
Right, so
people,
really down ticket.
Really down ticket. People you can like drive to the municipality building and you can meet them. Like, these are not people that are showcased on CNN. These are not people that play games for the camera like AOC does. Right. These are people who make actual law and legislative
in a very local level.
In a very local level that will really affect you. These are the people that are going to pass, you know, kinds of laws or legislation that would force your kid to be in a mask all day long at school. These are the people that really matter. So, you know, and so when I say that a blue progressive wave has taken over your local municipalities and your local seats in your local governments, basically an army of AOCs has taken over everything, that's what I'm talking about, because that's what happened. There's a lot of them, okay? And there are still a few in there that are okay, that, you know...
Well, we feel that they were positioned and placed in these roles, that they may not have actually been legitimately elected.
Just like AOC was not legitimately voted in, she was just put there. And the person that was legitimately voted in was pushed out.
Right.
And that was your message. That should have signaled to you to fight corruption and to fight fraud and to fight fraudulently installed people that don't have your best interest at heart. Because this army of AOCs, what they are representing are sustainable development models, like pushing people out of, you know, their suburbs or their neighborhoods or their, you know...
Well, let's walk through the different initiatives that each one of these groups...
Each one, based on like a really just broad, quick analysis of what each organization that has these army of AOCs installed. So we've got...
In the Democratic Party, you have these different factions. Okay,
right.
So you have
different factions. So first of all is obviously the DSA, which is the Democratic Socialists of America.
Right. And they've been working at this for a while.
Right. So they're big. So each little so-called progressive faction within the Democratic Party has has something that they want to tackle. It has one issue. They're one issue. Typically, they're one issue.
Yeah. Sometimes they cross over, but
Typically, they're like one issue factions. And so for the DSA, it's housing. Let's get everybody into
fair housing
and affordable housing, and it's all this slick marketing and all these great posters that talk about affordable housing, when really what it is pushing poor people into these sustainable development models, which have to do with surveillance and really imprisoning people in these sort of...
And get them into smaller
compact, more urban
dense,
surveilled, dense areas. Okay, that's what the DSA is about. They're all about affordable housing, but really what it is housing that is deeply controlled and deeply surveilled. Okay, right. The next faction of the Democratic Party is Justice Democrats. Justice Democrats are all about like the Green New Deal. And the Green New Deal is punitive. It's basically like, hey, you're a human being, you breathe, you put out carbon dioxide, we need to empty your pension because of that.
We need to tax you for
breathing.
breathing.
Thank you. And that's what Ro Khanna and some of these bigger names are all about.
Oh, you got to save water. So you know what? You're only going to be allowed 55 gallons of water a day, and and on top of that, we're going to tax you. And if you use over that amount of money or that amount of water, we're gonna charge you extra for that.
Right. So.
And that's the kind of thing that's actually taking place in California right now.
Right. So.
You know, and so these
one of the reasons we left.
Yeah.
So the Justice Democrats, who are also another army of, not quite voted. Did I vote for this person? I don't remember voting for this person. Kind of like, wait, how are they in their seats now? This army of AOCs, I like to call them. They're occupying seats in your local, they're representing your districts. They're in your local areas. So they're the Justice Democrats. Yeah. Now there's another group that it's actually, I don't actually think it comes out of the Democratic Party. I think it comes out of Libertarian. I don't necessarily think it comes out of the Libertarian Party per se, but it was promoted by Andrew Yang, who is a Libertarian. It's called Humanity Forward. And Humanity Forward is all about UBI. It's all about, putting people on a universal basic income, which is eventually going to turn into digital currency, which is something that those who control UBI can take away at will. Oh, you didn't get your COVID test this month? We're gonna yoink $150 out of your monthly universal basic income kind of thing.
Right.
So that's a punitive measure as well. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that all of these people under the cover of darkness have literally taken over various little positions in your district, in your state, in your county, in your cities, in your neighborhoods, all over. They're everywhere. They're kind of just everywhere. And there's so many of them, and they're kind of all sort of spread out all over the country. It doesn't feel like the occupation that it is. It's not, you're being occupied.
Right, but it's a strategy that is...
It's a wartime tactic.
Yeah, and it's a big strategy for future moves, right?
Oh, yeah.
So, and this is well known and practiced by, both parties and different factions. For a long time there, the religious right were filling up school boards. Because they wanted to get their agendas forward in schools and counteract whatever they felt was counter to their belief systems, and so school boards are really the place where a lot of all these basic politics start happening, and they work their way up. But the school board seems to be that place where it's like, if we can fill up the school board, we can get policy moving the direction we want it to be.
Right.
And so this is a strategy that's taken by a lot of people. Now this is that writ large, okay, and it's national, but it's at the local level,
right,
and it's highly coordinated. And Julie was showing me all these tweets that were coming through that were congratulating all these
people. Who are these people?
Right.
I must have sent out hundreds of tweets that was like, who is this person? Were they voted for?
Right. Yeah.
So it's an army of AOCs, and another thing that makes this even more challenging and more difficult for the population who might want to, or the constituents that might want to fight some of these really terrible initiatives that are going to come through in your local neighborhoods, is the fact that a lot of them, this army of AOCs that I'm talking about, a lot of them are they're gay, or they're trans, or they're a person of color. So if you do say, hey, look, I don't really want to pass a law to make it that, my kid has to wear a mask in school 8 hours a day, or I don't want to pass this law.
Or who are you and how did you get here?
Or who are you and how did you get there, and why are you supporting this corporate initiative that doesn't have anything to do with our local economy. It's going to hurt our local economy. Why are you doing that? The response that they'll get is, oh, you're transphobic. Oh, you're homophobic. Oh, you're racist. So they do that, and they're going to use identity politics as a way to shame you into not standing up for yourself and not standing up for, you know, these really important initiatives which are going to chip away at your life and your happiness. These are initiatives that are based in what I like to refer to as the misery industrial complex. It's basically misery upon misery upon misery, and that's the kind of initiatives that they will be promoting, that they'll be putting up for a vote. You know, they will be heavily backed by big money that you don't have, and all you have is your little voice to push back and say, wait, I didn't vote this person into office. I didn't vote this person onto my council board for my local municipality or my school board. I didn't vote for this person to be my tax collector, or, you know, all these little things that you don't think about that are on very local levels because you're very much distracted with the Trump and Biden show.
The circus that came to town.
You know?
Yeah. But, you know, to sort of reiterate, you know, like some of the most important offices that you know, if you engage in this in elections, okay, if you engage in liberal democracy and representative democracy, then the ones that are the most important for you to pay attention to that most people do not. Number one, sheriff. The sheriff of your county, if they are a constitutional sheriff, that means they are there to protect your rights that are protected by the Constitution, right? I mean, they are your rights, but the Constitution protects them. If they are a constitutional sheriff, they are going to be protecting that, because the sheriff is responsible at a level that is very, I mean, the sheriff is a very strong political position, much more than anyone has ever realized. And we learned this from one of the pundits that we watch, Catherine Austin Fitz.
Right.
And, you know, this is a really important office. So it's much more important than you may think. School board, again, coming back to that's a very important set of offices, all the way up to like board of supervisors or council or whatever you call them in your particular municipality. So these are the local laws that are the building blocks for larger state and then more national movements and laws that then legislature that then takes place. So it's important to pay attention to that stuff.
It really is. It's really important. I feel bad that people are so easily distracted with what's on the glitz and the glamour and the emotional driving force behind the presidential election. And they do that. They install these people. They have this army of AOCs that are installed. So knowing full well that you're going to be distracted, it's going to be hard for you. Like, this is going to be a really difficult existence now for you. You know, a lot of these people have Green New Deal initiatives that they're about ready to put forward into your local municipalities and your local neighborhoods. And these things are punitive in nature, but they will be presented to you as a way to save the planet, and that if you don't fall in line with these initiatives, then you're a bad person. And I think we're gonna wrap this up because it's over an hour, but one of the things I want to drive home is this unspoken and unseen thing that's coming out. And what I noticed is one of our patrons is she is one of the most charming, wonderful people you'll ever meet. She's local. She's someone we know personally. And she has, you know, maintained her support of us. And one of the saddest things that I'm seeing as I'm looking through, you know, Facebook and the different social media feeds is that she feels that she has to edit herself or censor herself because she might. I don't even know if this is true about her or not, but I'm going to just do a leap of faith here and say that she might be a Trump supporter. But she has, you know, quieted herself and not said anything because she's so afraid of the vitriol and the snarling and the antics and the bad behavior that's coming out of the liberal class that typically vote blue or whatever. And to me, that right there signifies a real problem, because if you're too afraid to even speak out about your belief system and be who you are, then how are you going to face these people in your local municipalities who want to throw a mask on your kid for 8 hours a day if you can't even speak out about who you voted for? Right. How are you going to, you know, speak out against the fact that your taxes are going to go up, and you're like, but I'm not seeing a benefit of that. My streets are still broken down. There's still blight everywhere. Why are my taxes going up like 800%? You know, if you can't even speak out because you're afraid of being attacked on social media because of who you are, how are you going to fight the real fight, which is here now? Because like I said, this army of AOCs have occupied these seats.
It's that question. It may not even be that question. It may be like more like why can't you fight that? Well, the reason is because it's been the game has been set up to go against you, to rig. You know, the game has been rigged so that, you know, if you do speak up, if you are in the minority, you know, which is for the most part, liberal democracy is about lifting up the minority voice and giving you know, a voice to the minority as opposed to the majority. Even though it's majority rule, it also pays attention to that minority voice. And in the situation that we're in today, that is being erased. It's being taken away, and it's going away via the common good and this language around that. And we're seeing that every day right now in 2020, especially with the COVID thing and the masking, and that's all part of the same strategic push to get us away from feeling like we have an individual voice to having to squelch what we actually feel and think and believe for the common good. And that's a real problem, and I think that we're, you know...
yeah, that's an interruption in humanity.
Yeah, you know, and so your own autonomy, and even your group autonomy. I can't think of the word. You know, your particular you know, community, your communal autonomy is even disrupted, because, as we keep saying, you know, a society or a group or a culture or whatever it is not free unless the individual is free. And, you know, we all have to be free people in order to participate in our own society. And our society will not be free, it will not be healthy, unless we have that autonomy of our own.
Book of Hours is determined to remain an essential platform that offers a creative interpretation for lockdown skeptics and experts who have been censored by mainstream press. Thanks to your donations, we can carry on doing this essential work as working artists. These big issues of the day are vital and need to be heard. So please share our videos, subscribe to our YouTube channel, make a one-time donation on our PayPal page, but most importantly, please be a part of our team on our Patreon page. Go to patreon.com/bookofhours and hit the blue button titled Become a Patron. Thank you.